Things just keep getting worse for Texas Republicans. 3 House Republicans from Texas announced their retirement last week. The most distressing for the GOP being Will Hurd, who only eked out his win in 2018 by under 1,000 votes and is only one of 3 GOP congressmen who represent a district that Hillary Clinton won in 2016. Hurd had been touted as the future of his party. Former CIA officer, the lone African-American Republican serving in the House, represents 800 miles of border. And now he's leaving. And then yesterday, Congressman Kenny Marchant, who represents a suburban Dallas district, announced his plans to retire. Marchant's retirement is from exactly the kind of district where Republicans fear they are losing their edge the most, metro area suburbs. Mitt Romney, get this, he won that district by a whopping 22 points in the 2012 presidential election. Not real competitive. 4 years later, Donald Trump won the district by just 6 points. And then last year, that district went for the Democrat in the Senate race, Beto O'Rourke, by 3.5 points when he ran against Ted Cruz. This is the doomsday scenario for Texas Republicans, and they are continuing to freak out about it. As Sean Trendy of Real Clear Politics writes, people grossly oversold GOP vulnerability in Texas pre-Trump and are grossly underselling it now. For more on the sea change Texas might represent, I'm joined by Evan Smith, CEO, co-founder of the Texas Tribune, and Brianna Brown, Deputy Director of the Texas Organizing Project, a grassroots racial justice organization. Evan, let me start with you because we've had this conversation before. You were someone who, for a long time, and you know Texas politics about as well as anyone, when there were liberals around the country saying, oh, look at the demographics, just look, it's going to go blue, it's going to go blue, saying, whoa, 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 whoa. When people were like, Wendy Davis, you were saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. Where are you now as you watch what's happening with these retirements, particularly in these suburban districts?
I'm still not buying it. I think if you've seen one congressional district, you've seen one congressional district. I think it would be a mistake. Look, I'll accept the fact that the optics are terrible for Texas Republicans right now. And by the way, we think there may be as many as 2 more additional retirements coming any day now. Republican-held seats. There may be 2 more, taking it up to 6. The optics are terrible. But every one of these districts is different. Not every single one of these retirements has produced a winnable seat for Democrats. I still don't think Democrats are necessarily in a position to win the state. I think the Senate race is going to be complicated. So I think it's hard to look at this and think, aha, finally the moment is here.
I will say Conaway is not a competitive seat. Of the 4 that have retired, 3 look fairly competitive. Conaway, who's the 4th, is not in a competitive district. I think that's fair to say. Brianna, the Texas Organizing Project is one of the most interesting groups in the country to me because you guys have put in a lot of work in Texas, and particularly in sort of metro areas, urban, suburban areas. What's the kind of work you've been doing, and what are the results been?
At top, we like to say that we fight with 2 fists, right? We fight with people power and political power. And the essence of what we do is really in the linked fates of black and brown folks across this state. We fundamentally believe that organizing is destiny, right? Is the destiny of the state and not just in demographics, right? Yeah. So we've seen success across the state in mobilizing voters around a big, bold issue agenda first and foremost. And our organizing, the organizing that we do is centrally about how are we motivating our voters to the polls. You know, it's not a foreign idea. There are a lot of groups out there, different special interest groups, that are able to mobilize their voters. And for black and brown folks that are on the margins, that don't have access to health care, that are living in neighborhoods where the schools are subpar and underfunded, having a reason to vote. People need a reason to vote. Yeah. Our votes need to be courted. And fundamentally, what we're about is making sure that we're expanding the electorate, and we have politicians that are responsive to the needs of what is increasingly the majority of Texans, which are black and brown folks.
Evan, so there's a few different dynamics. There's a urban, suburban, rural dynamic. There's a sort of racial, demographic dynamics. And Texas is a state, someone just did an analysis, Mississippi, with a lot of undervoting among communities, right? It doesn't have a high participation rate compared to some other states. In the suburbs, I mean, let's stop talking about, like, okay, the state's going to go blue and it's the doomsday for Republicans. But I am fascinated by what's happening in these suburbs, in these suburban districts. What is happening there that these folks are retiring, that we've seen a few of those seats flipped when, you know, Romney's winning a district by 22 points, that Beto wins by 3?
Well, the fact is, last election cycle, 2018, the real story of that cycle was the degree to which the suburbs, which had not even been open to voting for Democrats, became much more open to Democrats, if not bear-hugging Democrats. Fort Bend County outside of Houston, Pete Olson's area. Williamson County north of Austin. One of the retirements. Williamson County north of Austin, Hayes County south of Austin, Collin County, Denton County up around Dallas. These are communities that really did put the scare into Republicans. In some cases, they defeated Republican state lawmakers, and it's in these very places that the members of Congress are wondering if they should return themselves to the private sector. That suburban trend is about two things. It's about demographics, but it's also about the affordability of the big cities, and I believe big city voters being pushed out to the suburbs, taking their big city values and their big city votes with them.
And you just said something interesting, Brianna, about sort of giving people something to vote for. Because Texas does have, for a variety of reasons, I think the obstacles put in front of folks for being able to vote, it does have lower participation rates than a lot of other states. What's your sort of theory of the case about that?
Well, last year, we reached out to 900,000 unique voters across the state, delivered 465,000 voters during the midterm. 115,000 of those voters had never voted in a midterm before. I mean, those are big numbers. You know, Texas is a big state. You can go to scale really quickly. And I think it fundamentally goes back to, you know, this idea of, like, how do you expand the electorate, right? How do you give people something to vote for? When there have been everything from structural barriers that prevent people from fully participating in our democracy, to other kind of like barriers in the everyday, right? We don't have an opportunity. Getting to the polls. In 2016, we took 2,500 people to the polls in our Drive for Democracy program, because that is an additional barrier that people have. So I think that it's important to think about the conversation, how to expand our democracy by speaking directly to the voters, and in this case, voters who are often left out of the conversation.
Evan Smith and Brianna Brown, thank you both.